today, some of them are running the world. During the same era, our world became more populated, more urban, more connected, and therefore much more global, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multinational, and pluralistic. 9/11 dragged the United States into the global scourge of terrorism. The economic crash of 2008 wiped out as much as $22 trillion of wealth in the U.S. alone, along with many long-cherished assumptions about the American dream. For young and old alike, the optimism of the 1990s began to give way not merely to pessimism, but to outright cynicism. The meaning of family also shifted radically, to the point where traditional families, mom, dad, and kids, are no longer the majority. Perhaps that helped push the traditional American value on the individual toward the far more radical individualism and selfism, idolatry of self, that we see today. So what does all of this mean for the mentoring of men? Doesn't a man still need a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy? Yes, and more than ever. But consider that many men today who might hear Dad's clarion call to mentoring would have no clue as to who Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy were. That's because in 1995, the form of Christianity most dominant in American culture tended to be white, middle to upper middle class, and suburban. To be sure, America was becoming increasingly secular, but our culture still retained remnants of a Judeo-Christian worldview and the values that stem from it, which meant that the winds of culture, so to speak, were at the church's back. You could talk about God and no one objected. You could appeal to a moral code that generally valued ideals like honesty, integrity, courtesy, civility, equity, cooperation, and trust. Authorities were more or less obeyed, even if not always respected, and institutions were at least expected to fulfill their basic functions, or face severe consequences if they didn't. Not anymore. We now live in a post-Christian society where it's much more complicated to identify as a Christian. For one thing, that designation has become a marketing and political demographic term, one of the unintended but unfortunate consequences, I'm afraid, of the rise of the Christian right in the 1970s and 80s. By the way, in the New Testament, Christian is only used as a noun, never as an adjective. We should pay attention to that. Post-Christians, especially people under 40, regard Christians much less favorably than non-Christians did in the 1990s. Some view us with open hostility. Others are more tolerant but remain suspicious. They tend to have a favorable view of Jesus, of Christians not so much. Many assume Christians have a political agenda. They're too negative and judgmental. Their churches look male-dominated and oppressive to females and minority groups. They come off as arrogant in claiming that all other religions are wrong. They also take the Bible too literally and ignore science. So let's say you're a Christian who is a baby boomer and you're in a position of management at your company. You've been assigned as a mentor to a younger leader in training. That person has never been to a church, except perhaps for a wedding or a funeral. You'll learn that his parents were divorced when he was 10. He lives with his girlfriend. He has $83,000 in student loan debt to repay. The 529 funds from his grandparents more or less evaporated in the 2008 downturn. And he thinks boomers have pretty much screwed up the world. That's before he ever learns that you are a Christian. How much influence can you expect to have with that young man? More than you probably realize, I hope to show. But obviously, it's pretty much impossible to mentor someone if he distrusts you. Okay, what about mentoring someone who openly acknowledges that they are a Christian? Again, we can't assume anything anymore. What exactly does one mean when they say they're a Christian? Barna research shows that 73% of Americans identify as Christian. But when you factor in whether they attend church even once a month, and whether they say their faith is very important in their life, the percentage of practicing Christians drops to 31%. What happens if we then ask what those practicing Christians actually believe?